The single gunshot shattered the evening stillness like a hammer striking glass, sending Winifred Lawson's heart racing as she dropped to the floor of her remote homestead. At 42, she'd survived the Oregon Trail, a failed marriage, and 5 years alone in Wyoming territory. But trouble still found her with alarming regularity in this unforgiving land they called the frontier. The year was 1878, and civilization remained a distant promise in this corner of Wyoming. Winifred had built her modest ranch through sheer determination after her husband abandoned her for the California gold fields years earlier. News eventually reached her that he'd died in a mining accident, leaving her neither widow nor wife, just alone. Winifred peered cautiously through the window. The dying light of sunset revealed a man stumbling toward her cabin, one hand pressed to his side where a dark stain spread across his shirt. Behind him, 2 young boys struggled to keep up, terror evident even at this distance. She grabbed her Winchester and stepped onto the porch, rifle raised. "That's far enough," the man stopped, swaying slightly. "Please, madam, we mean no harm. I've been shot, my boys." His voice faltered as he gestured weakly to the children. Winifred hesitated only briefly before lowering her rifle. "Come in then, quickly." The man collapsed just inside her door. His sons, one perhaps 10, the other no more than 7, stood frozen, wide-eyed with fear. "Help me get your pa to the bed," Winifred instructed the older boy, who nodded silently. Together they managed to move the unconscious man to her bed. Blood soaked his shirt where a bullet had torn through his side. "What's your name, boy?" Winifred asked as she gathered bandages and whiskey. "Samuel," the older child answered. "Samuel Stone, that's my brother Benjamin. Our pa is Thomas Stone." "Well, Samuel, I'm Winifred Lawson." "You can call me Winnie. I need your help." She handed him a clean cloth. "Press this against your father's wound while I heat water." As she worked to clean and dress Thomas Stone's injury, she learned their story in fragments from Samuel. They'd been traveling north from Colorado when bandits attacked their wagon. Thomas had managed to get his boys onto horses and escape, but not before taking a bullet. "Pa said to find shelter," Samuel explained. "Said we'd be safe at the next homestead." Thomas Stone's wound, while serious, had miraculously missed vital organs. By midnight, he rested in a fever-induced sleep while his sons finally succumbed to exhaustion on a pallet Winifred had made near the fire. She watched the sleeping family, wondering what circumstances had sent a man and 2 young boys traveling alone through dangerous territory. Whatever their story, they'd found temporary sanctuary in her home. Thomas woke just before dawn, disoriented and alarmed until his eyes focused on his sleeping sons. "They're fine," Winifred assured him quietly, "but you nearly weren't. The bullet went clean through, which is a blessing." "Thank you," he managed, his voice rough. "I'm Thomas Stone." "Winifred Lawson," she offered him water. "Your boys told me about the attack. You're welcome to stay until you're well enough to travel." Thomas studied her face in the dim lamplight. "You're alone here. 5 years now." She didn't elaborate. "Rest. We'll talk more when you're stronger." Over the next several days, Thomas regained his strength gradually. Winifred learned he was a widower of 3 years, having lost his wife to pneumonia in Denver. He'd been a rancher in Colorado but had sold everything to start fresh in Montana, where his brother had land. "Everything we own was in that wagon," he told her on the 3rd evening as they sat by the fire after the boys had gone to sleep. "The bandits took it all, our supplies, money, even the deed to my brother's land." "What will you do now?" Winifred asked. Thomas shook his head. "I don't know." "Find work somewhere, I suppose, save enough to start over." Winifred hesitated before speaking. "Winter's coming soon. You won't get far before the first snow, especially with the boys." She glanced toward the sleeping children. "I could use help around here. The barn needs repairs before winter, and I've more livestock than I can properly tend alone." The offer surprised them both. Winifred had grown accustomed to her solitude, yet something about this broken family touched her heart in ways she hadn't expected. "I couldn't impose," Thomas began. It's not charity, she interrupted firmly. It's an exchange, your labor for shelter and food through winter. By spring, you'll have healed completely and saved enough to continue your journey. Thomas considered her proposal, his expression unreadable in the firelight. Finally, he nodded. That's more than fair. Thank you, Miss Lawson. Winnie, she corrected. Everyone calls me Winnie. The arrangement proved beneficial immediately. Once Thomas could move around without reopening his wound, he set to work repairing the barn roof that had leaked the previous winter. Samuel proved surprisingly capable with livestock, while young Benjamin followed Winifred everywhere, helping with cooking and gardening with enthusiastic if sometimes messy results. October brought the first frost, painting the surrounding hills with autumn colors. Thomas and Samuel spent days chopping and stacking firewood while Winifred preserved the last of her garden harvest. The routine they established felt surprisingly natural, as if they'd known each other for years rather than weeks. One evening after the boys were asleep, Thomas joined Winifred on the porch where she sat wrapped in a shawl against the autumn chill. "I never properly thanked you," he said quietly. "Not just for patching me up, but for taking us in. I don't know what would have happened to my boys if." "Anyone would have done the same," she replied, though they both knew that wasn't true. The frontier bred suspicion as readily as it did courage, not everyone. Thomas leaned against the porch railing. "May I ask why you're out here alone?" It's not common to find a woman managing a homestead without family. Winifred rarely discussed her past, but something about the quiet night and Thomas's gentle inquiry loosened her guard. "I came west with my husband in '59, she began. "We settled here, built this place together. Then gold fever took him in '65, he left for California, promised to return rich." She shrugged. "Learned 2 years later he died in a mining accident. By then, this place was home. I stayed." "I'm sorry," Thomas said. "Don't be. William and I were ill-suited from the start." His leaving was almost a relief, she smiled sadly. "Though I'd hoped for children. That was my one regret when he left, that we never had a family." Thomas nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Catherine, my wife, and I were blessed with the boys, but we'd hoped for more. She lost 2 babies before." He cleared his throat. Well, God had other plans. They sat in companionable silence, each lost in memories until Winifred stood. "It's getting cold. We should turn in." As October gave way to November, the first snow dusted the land, transforming the landscape overnight. The boys woke Winifred at dawn, excitement overcoming their usual restraint. Miss Winnie," Benjamin called, bouncing beside her bed. "The world is white." Winifred couldn't help but laugh at his enthusiasm. "So it is, Benji, so it is." The day became an unexpected holiday. Thomas helped the boys build a snowman while Winifred prepared a special meal of rabbit stew and the last of her preserved peaches. That evening, gathered around the fire, Benjamin asked for a story. "Pa tells good ones," Samuel informed Winifred, "about knights and dragons." Thomas feigned embarrassment. "I'm not much of a storyteller, but my Catherine had a way with tales. I try to remember them for the boys." "Please, Pa," Benjamin pleaded. As Thomas wove a story about a brave knight who saved a village from a fearsome dragon, Winifred watched the faces of the boys, illuminated by firelight and imagination. A familiar ache swelled in her chest, the longing for what might have been, for the children she never had. When Benjamin fell asleep mid-story, Thomas carried him to bed. Samuel followed after bidding Winifred good night. She remained by the fire, lost in thought until Thomas returned. "They're good boys," she said softly. "Catherine's influence," Thomas replied, settling beside her. "She had a gentle heart but iron will. I see her in them every day. You must miss her terribly." "Every day," he acknowledged, "but it gets easier to remember the joy instead of the loss." He studied Winifred's profile. "What about you?" "Did you never consider remarrying after your husband was gone?" She laughed quietly. "Who would I marry out here? The nearest town is 2 days' ride, and eligible men are scarce as hen's teeth. Besides, I'm past the age for starting a family." "There's more to marriage than children," Thomas observed. Perhaps, but I've grown accustomed to my independence. She stood abruptly. It's late. Good night, Thomas. That night, Winifred lay awake longer than usual, troubled by emotions she'd thought long buried. Thomas Stone and his sons had disrupted the careful balance of her solitary life, reminding her of dreams she'd abandoned years ago. The weeks before Christmas passed in a flurry of activity. Thomas and the boys settled into life at the homestead with surprising ease. Samuel helped with the livestock, learning to milk the cow and care for the horses with quiet competence. Benjamin, though still young, collected eggs and helped Winifred with small tasks around the cabin. Thomas proved himself invaluable. Beyond the repairs to the barn, he built shelves Winifred had wanted for years, fixed the chronically drafty window, and constructed a proper smokehouse using stones from the creek bed. His presence transformed the homestead in subtle ways, making improvements she'd never found time or skill to accomplish alone. More unsettling were the changes within Winifred herself. She found herself humming as she worked, taking extra care with meals, and even unpacking her mother's china plates that had remained wrapped since her journey west. She caught herself watching Thomas as he worked, appreciating not just his labor but the man himself, his patience with the boys, his quiet competence, the rare but transformative smile that appeared when something pleased him. One afternoon, returning from checking traps in the woods, Winifred heard laughter coming from the cabin. She paused outside, listening to Thomas teaching the boys to play checkers using buttons as pieces on a board he'd carved from a scrap of wood. "That's not fair, Pa." Samuel protested through laughter. "You can't move backward, kings can," Thomas explained. "Once you reach the other side, you earn the right." "When I'm king," Benjamin declared seriously, "everyone will eat cake every day." "A noble ambition," Thomas replied, his voice warm with amusement. "Though your subjects might develop toothaches." Winifred entered to find them gathered around the table, faces alight with simple joy. Thomas glanced up, his smile including her instantly. "Winnie, come show these rascals how checkers is really played. They think they can outwit their old pa." Without hesitation, she joined them, allowing herself to be drawn into their circle of warmth. By evening, when the boys had been tucked into bed, Winifred found herself lingering at the table with Thomas. "Thank you," she said suddenly. "For what?" he asked, surprised. "For bringing life back to this house. I didn't realize how quiet it had become until." She gestured vaguely. Thomas's hand covered hers briefly. "We're the grateful ones, Winnie. You saved us in more ways than just tending my wound." The simple touch of his hand sent warmth through her that had nothing to do with the nearby fire. Flustered, she withdrew her hand. "It's late. I should check on the animals before turning in." "I'll come with you," Thomas offered, reaching for his coat. The night air was crisp with coming snow as they crossed to the barn. Inside, the familiar smells of hay and livestock greeted them. Winifred checked the horses while Thomas made sure the cow was comfortable for the night. "Storm's coming," Thomas observed, noting the animal's restlessness. "Could be a bad one. The mountains protect us from the worst of it," Winifred replied, though she'd seen winters harsh enough to kill the unprepared. "But we should bring in extra firewood tomorrow, just in case." As they finished their tasks and prepared to return to the cabin, Thomas paused. "Winnie, I've been thinking about spring." Her heart constricted unexpectedly. Spring meant their departure, the end of this unexpected interlude in her solitary life. "I've been wondering," he continued carefully, "if perhaps there might be a place for us here. Permanently." Winifred stared at him, uncertain she'd heard correctly. "What are you saying, Thomas?" He stepped closer, his expression earnest in the lantern light. "I'm saying the boys are happier here than they've been since their mother died. I'm saying this land is good and with two people working it could be even better." He took a deep breath. "I'm saying I think we could build something here together." "Thomas, words failed her. "You don't have to answer now," he said quickly. "It's a lot to consider. I just wanted you to know I'm not counting the days until we leave. Quite the opposite." The storm arrived the next day, earlier and fiercer than expected. Snow fell in blinding sheets, driven by howling wind that found every crack in the cabin's walls. By midday, visibility had diminished to almost nothing. "Good thing we brought in extra wood," Thomas remarked as he added another log to the fire. "This might last a while. Confined indoors, they found ways to pass the time." Winifred taught the boys to make paper snowflakes from pages of an old catalog. Thomas revealed a hidden talent for whittling, creating a small menagerie of wooden animals that delighted Benjamin. They shared stories, played games, and for the first time in years, Winifred felt part of something larger than herself. On the storm's third day, as afternoon faded toward evening, Samuel asked a question that stilled the room. "Miss Winnie, how come you never had children, Samuel?" Thomas admonished, "That's not an appropriate question." Winifred waved away his concern. "It's all right, it's natural to be curious." She considered how to answer. "Sometimes, Samuel, life doesn't unfold the way we expect. I wanted children very much, but it wasn't meant to be." "Do you like having us here?" Benjamin asked, his young face serious. The question pierced her heart with its innocence. "Yes, Benji, I like having you here very much indeed." "Then you could be our mother," he suggested with a child's simple logic. "Our real mother is in heaven, but Pa says she wouldn't mind if we had a new one too." Winifred's eyes flew to Thomas, who looked both mortified and hopeful. "Benjamin," he began. I think that would be wonderful," Winifred interrupted softly, surprising herself with the admission. "But such things aren't decided so quickly." Later, after the boys were asleep, Thomas found Winifred at the window, watching the snow continue to fall in the darkness. "I apologize for Benjamin," he said. "Children speak without thinking." "There's nothing to apologize for," she replied. "Children also speak truth when adults circle it cautiously." Thomas moved to stand beside her. "What truth are we circling, Winnie?" She turned to face him fully. "That something has happened here in these months together, something unexpected. Not unwelcome, I hope," he said quietly. "No," she admitted. "Not unwelcome at all." Thomas reached for her hand, his touch gentle but sure. "When Catherine died, I thought that part of my life was over. I never imagined I'd find someone who could make me feel this way again." "I'm not young anymore, Thomas," Winifred said, voicing her deepest fear. "I can't give you more children." "I'm not looking for more children," he replied. "I'm looking for a partner, someone to share life with the joys and burdens alike." His fingers tightened around hers. "The boys need a mother, yes. But more than that, I need you, Winnie. Your strength, your kindness, your stubborn independence." A lifetime of caution made her hesitate. "How can you be sure? We've known each other only a few months." "Some things don't require years to recognize," he answered. "I knew the moment you opened your door to us, rifle in hand and determination in your eyes, that you were extraordinary. Everything since has only confirmed it." The storm howled outside, but within the cabin, a different kind of tempest brewed, one of possibility and hope long deferred. "I'm afraid," Winifred confessed. "Not of you or of loving the boys. I'm afraid of believing in this only to lose it." "That's the risk of living," Thomas acknowledged. "But isn't it better than the certainty of being alone?" When he kissed her, it felt both foreign and familiar, like returning to a home she'd never known she had. His lips were gentle, questioning rather than demanding, and Winifred found herself responding with a passion she'd thought long extinguished. They broke apart at the sound of a small voice from the shadows. "Pa!" Benjamin stood in his nightshirt, eyes wide. Thomas cleared his throat, embarrassment coloring his face. "What is it, son? Bad dream?" The boy nodded, then looked at Winifred with solemn eyes. "Were you kissing Miss Winnie?" Thomas glanced at Winifred, then answered honestly. "Yes, I was." "Does that mean she's going to be our mother now?" The question hung in the air between them. Winifred knelt to Benjamin's level, her heart pounding. "Would you like that, Benji?" He nodded vigorously. "Samuel would too." "He told me so." Winifred looked up at Thomas, whose expression held such tenderness it nearly undid her. "Well then," she said softly, "perhaps we should discuss it." Benjamin threw his arms around her neck. "Can I call you mother now?" The simple question unleashed emotions Winifred had suppressed for years. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she held the boy close. "Yes, Benji, if you want to." Thomas joined them, one hand on his son's shoulder, the other finding Winifred's. "Let's get you back to bed, son. We can talk more in the morning." After settling Benjamin, Thomas returned to find Winifred still by the window, her expression thoughtful. "Second thoughts?" he asked carefully. She shook her head. "No, just marveling at how life can change so unexpectedly." She turned to him. "A few months ago, I was resigned to spending my remaining years alone. Now, he prompted. Now I find myself contemplating marriage to a man I barely know, motherhood to boys who aren't mine by birth, and a future entirely different from what I'd imagined." She smiled through tears that threatened again. "And I'm not afraid anymore." Thomas took her hands in his. "Winifred Lawson, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife, of being a mother to my sons, of building a life together on this land you've loved so faithfully?" "Yes," she answered simply. "Yes to all of it." The storm lasted 2 more days, transforming the landscape into a pristine expanse of white. When it finally cleared, the world seemed renewed, much like Winifred herself, who moved through her daily tasks with a lightness she hadn't felt in decades. That evening, as they gathered for supper, Thomas announced their engagement to the boys. Samuel, old enough to understand the significance, responded with quiet approval. Benjamin, less restrained, bounced in his seat with excitement. "Does this mean we're staying forever?" he asked. "It does," Thomas confirmed. "This is our home now." Later, as the boys prepared for bed, Samuel approached Winifred with uncharacteristic hesitation. "Miss Winnie, I mean," he faltered. "You can still call me Winnie if you prefer," she assured him. "I don't expect to replace your mother in your heart." Samuel shook his head. "That's not it. I was wondering." He glanced toward where Benjamin was already snuggled under covers. "Benjamin's too young to remember our mother well, but I do. I was wondering if it's wrong that I want to call you mother too." Winifred felt her heart expand. "Samuel, nothing about loving someone new diminishes the love you have for your mother. She'll always be part of you." She touched his cheek gently. "I would be honored if you called me mother, but only when you're ready." Samuel nodded solemnly. "I think I'm ready now." That night, as Thomas read to the boys from a dog-eared copy of Robinson Crusoe, Benjamin interrupted with a question about the story. When Thomas explained, the boy nodded and said sleepily, "Thank you, Pa. Good night, Mother." Samuel, already half asleep, murmured, "Good night, Mother," before his eyes closed completely. Thomas closed the book, his gaze meeting Winifred's across the room. In that moment, the years of loneliness, the disappointments, the paths not taken all fell away. She had found in her 5th decade of life what had eluded her in youth, a family bound not by blood but by choice and love. They married 2 weeks before Christmas in the nearest town, a 2-day journey through snow-covered landscape. The ceremony was simple, witnessed by the boys and a handful of townspeople curious about the middle-aged bride and her ready-made family. Returning to the homestead as husband and wife, Thomas carried Winifred across the threshold while the boys cheered. That night, after the children slept, they shared their first intimacy as a married couple tender, unhurried, a physical expression of the bond that had grown between them over the winter months. Spring brought renewal to the land and their life together. They expanded the garden, added chickens to their livestock, and Thomas began construction on an addition to the cabin, a room for the boys, giving the newlyweds privacy they'd lacked during winter. By summer, the homestead flourished under their combined efforts. Winifred's knowledge of the land complemented Thomas's ranching experience. Together they created something neither could have achieved alone: a thriving home and a loving family. One evening, as summer waned toward autumn, they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the western sky in brilliant hues. The boys played nearby, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. "Do you ever regret it?" Thomas asked suddenly. "Taking in 3 strangers who disrupted your peaceful life," Winifred laughed. "Peace is overrated compared to joy." She leaned against his shoulder. Besides, I didn't just take in strangers, I found my family. Thomas wrapped his arm around her. When Catherine died, I thought our family was broken forever. I never imagined we could be whole again. Different, Winifred corrected gently, but whole, yes. As darkness settled over the land, Samuel called from where he and Benjamin had been watching stars appear. Mother, Pa. Come see the shooting star, Winifred rose, taking Thomas's hand. Our sons are calling. Together they joined the boys on the grass. 4 heads tilted toward the vastness of the night sky. A family forged not from blood but from something equally powerful, the choice to love, to belong, to create home wherever they found themselves together. And as the stars multiplied overhead, Winifred silently thanked whatever fate or providence had sent a wounded man and his sons to her door that autumn evening. She had been too old to bear children. Yes, but motherhood, she discovered, came in many forms. The most precious being the moment when a child who is not yours by birth chooses to call you mother with love in their heart. In that, she had found her greatest blessing.